it said, well, then you have to leave and you have to go
What?
into the woods. And I was like, no, what are you talking? I'm not leaving. My kid just died. Nobody in my house is functioning. Like, I can't go to my husband and be like, bye. And the boy said, no, if you want to live, you have to go somewhere away from your family and go all the way into your pain, or you're going to die.
We are back. Open relationships, transforming together. I am your host, Andrea Miller, and I am joined by my co-hosts, Joanna Schroeder and Brian Atkins. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are so grateful to be doing this show. It is so mission-driven. And just a quick reminder, open relationships, we are here to transform together by opening emotionally. If there's any other kind of opening happening, we're not going to judge. We even welcome it. But this is a show about opening emotionally at a time when the world, there's a lot of hurt and heartache out there. We know there's a loneliness epidemic, a relationship crisis. And we want to help people learn how to open up and prioritize in their relationships, because that is, as I always say, need to have, not a nice to have. So thanks for joining our show. We have Dr. Laura Berman, who is amazing. This is an amazing show we have. I know. It is so worth all these people in our studio audience cheering. Thank you. You guys do that so well, right on demand. And so we're excited to get going. So let's do the show.
Yeah, you want to welcome Laura Berman is here in our lobby. Should we let her in?
Let's let her in. Come on, Laura. We love you. All right. Woo! Oh my God, we got a big one today. I am so thrilled to welcome Dr. Laura Berman to Open Relationships, Transforming Together. Whew, gosh, so lucky to have you on the show today, Dr. Berman. So here's her amazing bio. Dr. Laura Berman is a world-renowned sex, love, and relationship therapist. She earned 2 master's degrees and a PhD from New York University. She has spent the past 30 years devoting her career to helping others learn to love and be loved better from a mind, body, and spiritual perspective. Dr. Berman is a columnist for USA Today, a New York Times best-selling author who has written 9 books and is an award-winning syndicated radio host. She currently hosts the popular love and sex advice podcast called The Language of Love, which is awesome. Dr. Berman was the sex, love, and relationship expert on the Oprah Winfrey Show. She regularly appears on TV and the media, and there is a ton more to say, but let's get into it. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you know, we are super fans of yours. I know when we were able to connect and figure out that you agreed to be on the show, we fanned out, fangirled and fanboyed out. And I have to say that in preparing for our show today, as I've gotten to know you and your work even better, I'm sincerely blown away by your huge heart, your wisdom, and your courage. And I'm grateful that you have been answering the call as a superhero, and we'll get into that, what I mean by that, and for being on our show. We want to cover a handful of helpful, fascinating topics, from having more and better sex to successful manifestation, to communing with people on the other side. Yes, for real. As well as one of the things you talk about that I love is understanding how grief can be a portal. But I'd like to start with what happened to your family 2.5 years ago, given the risk to other families. And as Joanna and I talk about a lot, we're both moms of teen and adolescent boys, so it hits home for us super hard. And just given how that has shaped the incredibly important, impactful work you're doing. So do you mind talking about your sweet boy, Sammy, and what happened?
Of course. And to answer the last question first, I'm still figuring out what it all means for my. I'm not sure what it means yet. Mostly for anything, but including, as my career unfolds and expands, it's been an interesting journey just in that alone. But so I'm a mom of 3 boys: Ethan, Sammy and Jackson. Ethan is 27 now, and Jackson, the youngest, is 18. He just went to college, so I am officially an empty nester.
Oh my gosh.
Sammy, my middle son, 2.5 years ago, was murdered with fentanyl poisoning at age 16. So we were sheltering at home during the pandemic, and he was extremely, almost too bright. He was one of those kids that was brilliant and had a better vocabulary than most people by the time he was 4. Like, I don't even know where he came from. And was so driven and so smart and so sensitive and so sweet, and kids just did not get him. So he was very socially bullied. Parents and adults and teachers adored him, but he did not make a lot of sense to a lot of kids. And so he struggled to find his place. And before leading into the pandemic, as he was entering high school and in his first couple of years of high school, he was on the football team. He was making straight A's. He wanted to go to NYU. He wanted to study international business. And in many ways, the pandemic was a relief to him because he was so socially tortured at school. He had to eat lunch with his football coaches because the kids were so mean to him.
God.
And unfortunately, so I only mention that because I know it was part of the milieu, was part of the horrific recipe that eventually led him to make this fatal decision. But the truth is, every one of our children is, one stupid decision away from this, unfortunately. The way the world, when we were kids and teenagers, you could experiment with drugs and alcohol within reason. I mean, if you started shooting up heroin or doing a lot of coke, you were going down a very dangerous, slippery slope. But a little bit of experimentation certainly would not kill you, and it probably wouldn't addict you if you were reasonable about it. I mean, I certainly did that stuff,
Oh, no kidding.
And,
well, yeah,
and
when you say stupid decision, I want to say innocent decision.
yeah. Well, no, and dumb. I mean, good kids make dumb decisions. Their
Totally.
prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. They can't weigh the consequences of their actions. All my boys were ADDers, so they were a couple of years behind their peers in emotional maturity and thinking through the consequences of their actions and impulsivity. And, and Sammy was sheltering at home, really isolated, not that they all weren't. He couldn't play football. He couldn't socialize. And right before the pandemic, he had come to me and said, the only kids that will hang out with me are the kids that smoke pot. And they won't hang out with me unless I smoke pot. So can I smoke it? And I said, there's a part of me as your mother who desperately wants to say yes, because I want you to be able to fit in. But also as your mother, there's no freaking way I'm going to say yes to that. We need to find you a different group of friends. Let's get you involved in an after-school activity. Let's find you, another outlet so that you can meet other kids who who have a shared interest with you. And we had just started exploring that when the pandemic hit. But it was actually a relief for him because he didn't have to go into the war zone emotionally every day. And he was doing fine, but he was also desperately wanting to connect with other kids. And the kids who he found who would connect with him are the kids that were into drugs.
Oh,
So
my God.
what ended up happening, and you don't have to be a kid who's bullied or marginalized for this to happen. I've now met thousands and thousands and thousands of parents. There are 300 people a day, like a jumbo jet dropping out of the sky full of people, 300 people a day dying of this. But what I didn't understand is I thought in order to get drugs, my kids would need to go to a drug dealer. They would need to find a drug dealer, know a drug dealer, go to a place with drug dealers, know someone who knew a drug dealer. It never occurred to me that drug dealers would find our kids, which they do through Snapchat. So a drug dealer had found him. We had let our kids have free reign of social media because it was their only social outlet. So our rule with them was like, look, these are unheard of times. We're all stuck at home. You can be on social media as much as you want as long as your schoolwork gets done. I wasn't going to put limits on them. And so a drug dealer got in touch with him via Snapchat. and sent him a very colorful menu of individual pills and powders and whatever, name the drug that was on the menu, that he would deliver to our house like a pizza. And so Sammy decided to try to impress this group of friends and, was curious, I'm sure, also. And for a couple of bucks, got this guy to deliver something while we were sleeping, unbeknownst to us. And on Super Bowl Sunday, February 7th of 2021, he asked me to come into his room later because he wanted to create a resume because he wanted to get an internship for the summer because he was getting ready to go into his senior year and he was going to be applying to colleges. So that was my last conversation with him. And then I went and did some errands with my youngest son, Jackson, and we went up into his room. Jackson was bringing him some C's candy that we'd stopped and gotten. And I was going to talk about the internships, and he was on the floor and was already gone. And he had taken something that he thought, we don't even know what he took. He'd taken something that he had gotten from this dealer. I found out later from one of his friends. He had sent a screenshot of the menu to his friend and said, I'm going to order something from this guy. So he had ordered something that was not what he thought he was getting, and it was fentanyl. And it only takes a few grains of sand worth of fentanyl to kill you, and they are putting it in absolutely everything. So anything that you take that either doesn't come, that doesn't come from a cannabis dispensary, or that doesn't have your name on the pill bottle as a prescription to you
from a legit pharmacy,
for you is 65% of those drugs are likely to be laced with fentanyl, and that's what we're seeing happening. So because what's happening is China is sending the precursor to the fentanyl. It's really cheap, really easy to transport. They send it to the Mexican cartels, and this is all documented by the DEA. They talk very openly about what's, I'm not making this up, but China sends the fentanyl to the cartel. Not only the fentanyl, but the molds to make counterfeit.
Right, I've seen those. Right, the Percocet, the ADHD, the common the Adderall, and it looks identical. Right?
So they send the molds to make the counterfeit pills to the cartels. So then the cartels in their laboratories make the counterfeit fentanyl laced or pure fentanyl, depending on, they're not very scientific about it. And they don't care if they kill us. And China doesn't care if they kill us. They're making a ton of money. And if the dealers don't kill the person they sold it to, then they have a customer for life, because it's if Sammy had lived, he would have been a severe addict. Fentanyl is 3 times as addictive as heroin. So if you live through the poisoning, it's not an overdose, because an overdose is when you take too much of something.
Right, it's a poison.
You were taking.
It's absolutely
murder.
He was poisoned. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but if he had lived that, and we see this all the time now, because unfortunately I've met thousands of other parents like us, then the kid is, struggling with hardcore addiction for the rest of their lives. So it's devastating.
It's
obviously.
Systemic.
Yeah.
And well, firstly, thank you for sharing that with us. I didn't know that about the social bullying and so forth. And I want to come back to that because we know how common and devastating that is.
Yeah.
And I'm eager to talk about your grief journey. Again, as I said a few minutes ago, it has been revelatory to watch you going from the worst thing that could happen. And you literally said one of your social posts that your heart is completely shattered. And I'm not sure how to keep breathing. It's like, how did you keep breathing? I'm eager to come back to that, but I also I want to share what you said. Thousands of families. We have a close couple family friend who also lost their godson to something very similar. Young man, 20-something, was at a party, was talking about how he was having a hard time sleeping. Somebody gave him, I think, he thought it was a Percocet, maybe, or something, some kind of sleep aid or something to help whatever he was struggling with. And he was supposed to fly to Denver that next day. His parents were waiting for him to get off the airplane, and the rest of the story. And it is So when I think about my boys, 10 and 13, and Joanna, your boys, in fact, I was chatting with one of the local, we just had back to school night, and I was chatting with the our social studies teacher, and he said, just even back to the concern about where it can be laced. And you said the right thing. They're putting it in everything.
And cocaine and pills and anything you take, they are putting it in. And it will not just get you wasted. It will kill you.
It will kill you. And that's why I feel
people
like
don't
as
understand.
parents, teachers, administrators, coaches, I feel like we cannot shout about this strongly enough to keep our kids alive. But I've even heard of adults that use drugs recreationally. They still keep their jobs. They're fine family people. They just like to party a little bit and no judgment there. But those people
are dying too.
And they're leaving
the
their
number
kids.
one killer of young adults, and it is in Orange County, California. I was just talking to the DEA there. That it is the number one killer of teenagers, above car accidents or anything else. So it is, and it's in every city and every county in the country. And it is something that we can't, it's devastating. I mean, I can't even believe that there are close to 15,000 parents on our Facebook support group. Because when Sammy first died and you referred to that text, that post I made, it was on Instagram. The reason I posted that, I don't even remember writing that. I wrote it. I remember writing it, but I don't remember thinking about what to write. I don't even know how I came up with what to write. What had happened is I found him dead. My husband, screamed for my husband, who came up and started doing CPR while I called the ambulance. The paramedics came and tried to revive him unsuccessfully and told us he was gone. And I, lost all time and space. And then I eventually got in touch with one of his friends, so-called, friends, and said that, what did he take? What do you know? What happened? Something happened. And the police who had found him, when the paramedics came and the police came, they said, we think this is fentanyl. We're seeing this everywhere. And the reason we think that is because he's in what's called, this is horrible, but I'm going to say it for the sake of other families. He was in the fentanyl death pose, they call it, because your heart stops and you fall backwards on your back and then you aspirate on your own vomit. And that's basically how you die. And so it was clear that is what had happened, but that's all they knew. And so I reached out to this friend and he said, well, Sammy did send me a screenshot and he sent me the screenshot of this extremely colorful, kid-friendly menu with the dealer's Snapchat handle on it.
Oh my God.
And we'll deliver for free.
Oh my God, those fuckers.
Excuse
my
whatever.
language, but Jesus.
And so I go running to the police who are still in the house waiting for the coroner and saying, look, here he is. You can get him. And they looked at me and they're like, we're really sorry. We don't even bother to call Snapchat. They won't help us. They won't give us any information. They cite privacy calls and they won't even return our calls. And the most that they'll do is maybe take down this guy's profile, but then he's going to pop right back up with another one,
different
and
profile.
then it'll be that much harder for us to catch him. And so then
child murder.
So then I said, well, let me order drugs from him right now. Pretend to be a kid, order drugs from him right now, and you can stay here. And they're like, oh no, we can't. And I wasn't. If I had had my wits about me, I would have fought him on that and done it anyway or something, because they were in my house for hours. They did eventually catch the guy and had enough to press charges. At least the police felt like they had enough evidence. But unfortunately, the district attorney of Los Angeles does not prosecute drug dealers. So he said that because Sammy had gotten the drugs from this guy on a Thursday and took them on a Sunday, that he didn't want to take him to court. But evidently he says that to everyone. So,
oh my God,
Sammy's killer is still walking around, probably killing other kids.
That is insane.
It's really insane. It's beyond insane. We are actually fighting for laws to change right now, not only around the consequences for fentanyl dealers, but also so that all social, because the biggest danger in addition to fentanyl is the way that the kids are getting the drugs. That's what blew my mind. And the reason I made that post is because as soon as I heard that we weren't even going to catch this guy, and he actually got to my kid on Snapchat, like I had talked to him about, taking naked pictures,
Yeah. Right.
or
Just
posting
that was it.
something, that was the shit I was worried about. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? The drug dealers they're matched with our kids on Snapchat, and the algorithm is actually pushing the dealers to our kids. I mean, it's insane.
Just like porn.
What's
I mean,
happening.
obviously,
Yes.
at much greater consequences in that instance with drug dealers. But that's insane. And so I know you guys have pursued a suit against Snapchat. Is that still in the
Yeah,
pipeline?
we're one of 65 families that are suing Snapchat, not for the free speech thing, because that's what they hide behind. It's free speech, and social media is treated like the phone companies. So legally, so far, that's going to change. And we are fighting for that change. But up to now, when this law was created 20 years ago, I mean, think about where social media was 20 years ago. It exists.
Yeah.
But when this law was created 20 years ago, it basically said that the internet, including social media, since social media is on the internet, should be treated basically like the phone company. The phone company can't be sued for
just the pipes. We're just the pipes, right?
Just
it's
the pipes.
Bullshit. It is
right.
so, I mean, total 100% bullshit.
Right. It is bullshit, but we don't have legal recourse. But we are suing them not for the free speech piece, not for the privacy piece that they hide behind, but the fact that they knowingly, and we spoke to Evan Spiegel. He knows for a fact, and other families have spoken to him, and there's clear evidence that he has known for years that their algorithms are pushing dangerous content to our kids. Drug dealers, eating disorder content, sex, slavers and pimps.
Hate speech, lots of hate speech.
And so when you let your kids on social media, it is literally, and I did not understand this, it is literally, and I promise you this is true, and no matter, they will run circles. You cannot monitor, and I'll tell you why we're trying to change this. You can't monitor what your kids are doing on social media. And so when you let them on, it is the equivalent, literally, of dropping them off in the darkest, most dangerous, most crime-ridden part of town with pimps and prostitutes and drug dealers on every corner soliciting them and expecting them to be able to navigate it. And they can't. And so we're part of this lawsuit suing them for the way the algorithm pushes this content to our kids. That's what we're suing them about. And we're not suing them for money. We're suing them to change the algorithm.
Yeah.
We are also, and it is now officially a bill on Capitol Hill, we have Sammy's Law, they're naming it, which will require, and it's got bipartisan support, but it will require that every social media platform that allows children on it also allows parental monitoring software. So, for instance, there's lots of companies like this, but one, that I'm become very familiar with is Bark. I have no investment with them. I got no agenda with them, but they're a great company but Snapchat doesn't allow them on their platform.
God.
Facebook instant messaging doesn't allow them. Instagram instant messaging doesn't allow them. Discord the gaming system doesn't allow them yet, because they know that if the parental monitoring software were on there, then our kids may not want to be.
Yeah.
But if there is a law that says all social media platforms that allow children on them must allow parental monitoring software, what the monitoring software does is that if your kids are looking at any of these secret emojis that mean drug dealers or drugs, if they're talking about suicide, if they're talking about bullying, sex, you get pinged. And if they're, listening to the Sex Pistols, or whatever, you'll see that.
You'll know. Oh, God forbid.
You won't go confront them. But if they're talking about with a drug dealer, I could have gone into Sammy's room and changed the trajectory. Right before he took drugs.
Well, it reminds me of that Life 360 app, which we just started using, and that's amazing. How what you know, and it's a
same thing
when your kids
are
are younger. And I just well, okay. So how you said you've got bipartisan support for Sammy's Law, and
Mhm.
any sense of when we can expect our
Well,
Congress
I mean,
to push that through?
they got to be functioning again.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good place to start. Okay, we got a Speaker of
And
the
then,
House.
and
Let's
then
go.
it takes a while. You remember from
Yeah.
Schoolhouse Rock, right?
Oh,
That's
right.
how
Oh, yeah. To pass a bill.
I'm
What it
just
takes.
a bill.
Yeah.
Here on
Oh my God, that takes me
Capitol
back. I've 8 years old. I love it.
Yeah, but it does take a while. Once it gets support, once it passes in the House, then I don't remember all the I should know this. Then it
Yeah.
goes to the Senate, or once it passes in the Senate, then it goes to the House, and then the president. So it has to be voted on again and again and again. But it is officially a bill. It is gone in the system, and it has bipartisan support. And there are also now 30 DAs around California that are trying to change the laws as well. So there's a lot of awareness building. But the reason that I made that initial post the night he died was because I was so flabbergasted that not only was Snapchat not helping and not willing to help, but that the drug dealers were finding our kids. Our kids don't have to look.
And there's a business model that supports it.
And
there are
there's a
DAs
business
that know
model that
this and
supports
law
it.
enforcement that knows this. It's like, could
Yes.
the world get any
Yeah.
more insane? If we were watching a movie if this was fiction, we would say, that's insane. That's so
Yes.
stupid. That wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And yet it's happening. One quick thing I want to ask you about, do you think it would be helpful at all for there to be a petition for, at the county level, at the state level? Like, I would love to petition my senators to sign this bill. Is there anything along those lines?
There might be at one point, if you go to Facebook to Families for a Fentanyl-Free Future, that support group, you can join there. And it's a little devastating because you will see close to 15,000 other families posting there with pictures of their kids who died the same way. But it's a beautiful, supportive community. And every time there is a protest, because we protest outside Snapchat headquarters, I think 4 times.
Oh,
over
God
the
bless
past
you,
2.5
people.
years.
Nice.
Every time there is a protest or a rally or a petition or anything to take action around, we talk about it there. And I always talk about it on social media as well. However, I've been much more quiet this time because Sammy's Law was about to go in front of the Senate and the House in California before, it ended up in the national. And I made the mistake of posting about it and asking for people to call the decision makers and say, I support this bill. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that Evan Spiegel follows me. And so the next thing I knew, I was about to go there in 2 days or 3 days. It was all set. I was going to testify. And the next thing I know, someone had got, because they have strong lobbyists. I mean, they helped get
yeah.
just
Well,
someone
welcome to
had
America.
the kibosh
Lobbyists.
on it. And
Oh my gosh.
and it didn't happen. So I'm a little quieter this time around. But if you go to on my own social media, but if you go to the Facebook support group of Families for a Fentanyl-Free Future, you'll find all sorts of ways.
Well, yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. And I admire all your advocacy and how I can't imagine that you haven't saved a ton of kids based on.
Well, that's what
the
I
work
wanted
you're
to
doing.
interject and say. So we also live in LA County where you were living when Sammy died, and my kids. So my oldest just started college too. He's 18. So maybe just your youngest. And then I have a 10th grader now. And then I have a little one too. And when Sammy passed and I read that post, the first thing I did was I took it to my boys and I said, I have been listening to this person on the radio since you were babies, and I feel like I know her. I know I don't. This is her little boy. And I shared that with them, and they could relate.
Yeah.
They could relate to Sammy. They could relate to you and I sharing these features. That was a moment when I had their attention. And I sent that to all of my friends, and they sent it to their friends, because I think before you shared this about Sammy, the idea we had about who overdosed, we were always wrong about who overdoses
I
and who
was
is
too.
poisoned and who's, I think the idea we had in our head was an already very troubled child who had been drinking in a dark alley already.
Yeah,
And
no,
what we were able to do was show this sweet boy, and bullied or not bullied, friends or not friends, every child of all sorts of types and socioeconomic backgrounds are dying from this.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
when you posted that, I can only imagine even just that night, so many of us woke up.
Yeah, no, I've definitely heard that. And it's actually not that easy. It's much, I find, my husband and I have just naturally found ourselves dividing and conquering, so he really is passionate about the advocacy, and he's involved in having all the conversations with the task groups and the lawmakers and the lobbyists and like, to me, after that happened with the California law, I lost it. And I was so tired of spitting in the wind. And I'm like, my kids are not going to die from this. Like, they, God forbid, may die from, I'm not going to say they'll never die, but they sure as poop aren't going to die from social media or drugs. In fact, both of them, not because of me. I would have been fine if they continued drinking or explore, especially the 27-year-old who's legal, but both of them call themselves sober. Not that they've ever been addicted, but they don't do any drugs or drink because they're so freaked out, by their, and so I'm not worried about them. I'm the only reason we're doing this is so that more kids don't die, but I find it unbelievably painful and infuriating to do the advocate. So I will show up to testify. I will show up at the rallies. I will show up in the media if it's important for me to be there. But it's mostly my beloved husband who is really handling this part, the part that and I'm so grateful to him because he's doing it and I don't have to. But
let's give a shout out to Sam Chapman.
He's doing
Sam,
an amazing.
you are the man. Thank you. And no, seriously, because I can imagine on the one hand, maybe it feels cathartic, but I can also feel like how unbelievably exhausting and tedious. And
it's so infuriating. I want to murder someone. I'm so furious. Yeah, he's tireless.
God bless. Your sweet hubby. Mm-hmm.
And I am, and I know I mean, not that he loves doing it. I know it hurts to do it, but it is compensated because, also maybe because he's a man, but taking action, creating change. Like, he feels like he's doing something. He knows he's saving lives,
and he is,
and he feels like he's honoring Sammy by doing that. And it's part of his healing. And I'm so grateful that he feels that way because I sure as shit don't. But
and I also think that, sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you
I also think that, so we had a family member who died of an oxy overdose when he was in college. And this was before the fentanyl crisis. And it was, as far as we know, he had taken it as a party drug. And it was just, that fact just disappeared from all conversations. It was just this tragedy that happened and there's no conversation around it. And I believe that our family at large just wanted to protect him and honor him. And I think you've set an example of the way to honor him is to help other kids not die this way. And then also who knows, the mom of this child in my family may see you and be like, I don't have to be ashamed.
No,
I don't have to hide this. That's hugely powerful to me.
Yeah, good kids make bad decisions. They just do.
Yeah.
And it happens, and it used to not kill you, and now it does. And where I tend to focus most of my time and effort, unless I'm needed in the advocacy realm, and I fully support it, but I just, don't like to spend all of my time there, is just around the healing piece and helping. It was shocking to me after he died, as I started hearing from thousands and thousands of people, how nobody knows how to grieve. Nobody knows, and I had so much grief before he died, not like this. I mean, nothing really prepared me for that depth and breadth of loss, but I had already learned in practice, not just in theory as a therapist, but in practice, how to grieve. And I'd learned what can happen when you don't properly grieve, because I'd had that experience too.
And what do you mean by that? Because I think it's intuitive on the one hand, and yet I feel like there's this in our society. Oh, you're so strong, you're not crying, and right, and it just feels so misguided. So what's the advice of what not to do?
What not to do is what we're trained to do and what society expects us to do, which is to squelch it, not be sad be sad for as little a period of time as possible, be in as much little pain as possible for as little amount of time as possible, and, to just positive think it away or make meaning out of it or whatever. And, luckily or not so luckily, depending on how you look at it, I look at it as luckily, I had already learned that lesson when my mom had died, and this was 11, 12 years before Sammy died. That was my biggest, most profound loss before him. She was my person, and she died of what was ultimately metastasized breast cancer. And I was doing Oprah's last season with her, launching a show on the Oprah Winfrey Network as she launched the network, 5-day-a-week syndicated radio call-in show live. 3 kids in elementary school.
Oh my God,
you had to get in high school.
Great.
And I was like, no freaking time to grieve. Like,
my gosh.
I'm just, I would cry a little bit, but I was like, no, I can't. I got to keep going. And I could distract myself away from it.
Oh my God.
And within a year, I had breast cancer with none of the risk factors, with none of the genetic components. At 40 years old, perfectly healthy, I had breast cancer in the same breath she did. And I had to completely stop my life, and I had to go through chemo and a mastectomy and reconstruction and the whole thing. And that, I am convinced, because that taught me so deeply, that going through that and going on that journey and everything I learned through that journey taught me that when we are unwilling to be with our pain, it causes dis-ease.
It makes us sick, right?
Us sick. It causes, and this has been causes inflammation. Like, for instance, we always have cancer cells. All of us do. But inflammation is what makes it turn into real cancer. And we know that
malignant,
and we know that inflammation is caused by many things, but including a strong causal factor is emotional distress, chronic stress, and I just was repressing, squelching, and not ever letting. In fact, I'd learned from this energy healer, because I was like, I have to go film tomorrow and I can't even complete a sentence. And she taught me how to contain my emotions. Her intention was to teach me how to contain emotions temporarily and make an appointment with myself later to go back and feel whatever I was not in a position to feel while I have all the cameras on me. But of course, the way I used it was to just not feel anything.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I knew how to squelch it, but I never would let it out until I got sick. And that was a life-saving lesson for me. And one I really took to heart, and was given the message very clearly to take to heart after he died.
Grief is such a wild thing. I had one of my best friends died in February a year ago, and it was out of nowhere, and she was a mom and she had 2 little kids. And I remember those times when I was like, okay, I've lost people before, like I can handle this. And then I would catch myself just totally, I don't want to say dissociating because it's not clinically that, but like not even knowing what was happening around me.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I was driving, I got 2 speeding tickets in 1 month, and I hadn't had any in 10 years before that. And I wasn't eating, and I wasn't connecting that stuff to Misty dying. And when I started to connect it, then I was like, I'm going to connect with it. And then I started telling everybody all the time. I'd be like, well, one of my best friends just died. I'd be like, oh, you were late for your appointment. I'd be like, one of my best friends just died. And it's probably seemed ridiculous, but that was my truth. One of my best friends just died. And I'm just stupid right now. I'm stupid. I'm not hungry. My stomach is always churning.
I forget everything.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
grief,
It's
and
grief.
It's helpful to have people say that to you. Like, you may not be okay right
Yeah.
now.
No, you're not okay when you lose someone. And it's not, obviously, losing someone to death who is important to you is the worst kind of grief. But we grieve when a relationship ends, when a job we care about ends, when, there's I don't think there's anyone on the planet who hasn't been through grief over the past 2 or 3
Yeah.
years of one
Oh.
kind or another. But what we tend to do is just like carry on,
Yes.
be
Well, and that's what's
strong and
noble, right?
carry
In our
on.
very capitalistic,
Yeah.
just stoic, we just want to be strong, and it's so
Yeah.
misguided.
It's so
And
misguided, and it's so toxic, and it's so devastating. And for me, I got the message. I opened my more psychic channels probably after I went through that dark night of the soul after my mom died. I started really exploring quantum physics and working with healers and learning, and so I use it a lot in my work and in my day-to-day. I mean, we all have these abilities, but I've cultivated them with intention. But mostly when I get messages or get knowings, it's like I'll know something, I'll just know something, or I'll feel something, or sometimes I'll see like a movie. Like I have this weird thing where when I'm working with someone, I call it like seeing their point of fracture. Like I see a point in their early childhood. I can see the visual of a seed that represents the break where they forgot how worthy of love they are. It's just like weird moments, like a little girl dancing around the kitchen and her grandmother dresses her down for being slutty. Like weird moments like that that are hard to make up. But that was that was most of it. But after Sammy died, it was like less than a week after he died, and I was sitting on the beach because that was like the only place I could breathe. And I heard a voice, which I'd never heard anything before. And I wasn't even asking for any guidance or anything. I was barely breathing. But the voice said, "Do you want to live or die?" Which was kind of shocking.
God.
And I knew exactly what that question meant, not because I would kill myself, because that was not on the table, but from my past experience, I knew that I could easily die from this. I could let myself die. And I know many parents who just to.
Yeah, kind of stuff it
Just
away.
disappear.
Just give up, and
nobody could blame you, or nobody could blame a parent. I mean, I think we all think at times, when we're parents, the worst case scenario, and you think, what would you do? And it's very macabre, but I think it's very natural in a macabre kind of way.
Of course. Yeah. And I was what was shocking to me was not the question, but my answer, which was such a powerful, full body, like, I want to live.
Oh, thank God.
I thought to myself, what? What do you, but it was like I suddenly understood on a physical level what we all cognitively understand about how valuable life is.
Laura, do you think, let me ask you a serious question. Do you feel like, did it feel like your mom? Did it feel like Sweet Sammy Boy? Did it feel like more like the universe?
Felt like it was God. I mean, it wasn't either one of them. It felt like, or like my higher self, which I consider like my God self. We all have that higher, that higher thread that connects to the
It's that purple chakra, right? That connects us to the universe.
And so I felt flooding through me this visceral awareness of what a insane miracle it is to get to be in these bodies. And the fact that I get to be here, and that sperm and that egg met and grew,
and they
for
made
9 months,
you,
and they made me. I am still here is insane, and it is such a priceless gift, and it can be snatched. And it's like, I don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. Like, none of us know, and it's such a gift to be here. So I said,
affirmation. It is a miracle.
I want to be here. And so then the next thing the voice said, and it hasn't talked to me since, I haven't asked it to because I get messages other ways, but it said, well, then you have to leave and you have to go into the woods And I was like, no, what are you talking? I'm not leaving. My kid just died. Nobody in my house is functioning. Like, I can't go to my husband and be like, bye. And the voice said, no, if you want to live, you have to go somewhere away from your family and go all the way into your pain, or you're going to die.
So what'd you do? Oh my God.
I was shitting a brick because I'm a recovering codependent, and I did not want to do that to my family. But it was
or be afraid. I mean, God, you feel like, talk about being at risk to be alone when you don't.
Well, I knew. It meant alone without my family. So as I tried it on, and I called up my best friend Tina, who is so tapped in and tuned in, and is one of the best. I call her my emotional support angel. Like, she can hold anything you give her. You know,
we
she's
love
one of those,
you, Tina.
Yeah, she's one of those people that can hold all your pain without stumbling. You know.
Wow.
And so I called her. I was like, I don't know what the fuck just happened. I can't leave.
Wow.
And she said, well, let's just think about this, you know, because 1440 Multiversity, which is this gorgeous retreat center where I had done I'd run several retreats there, is in Santa Cruz in the Redwoods there. And they had reached out to me when they heard what happened to Sammy and said, hey, if you want to come with your family, we're closed for COVID, but we'll open the faculty house for you, give you free reign of the campus. So Tina was like, you remember 1440 said you could come. I'll go with you. I'll, make sure everything runs smoothly. You can do this if you want to. And so I had the ball. I don't know how I got the balls together to do this, but I went to my poor husband and I said, I need to leave for a week. I know our son just died 4 days ago. I need to leave.
Oh my God. Holy crap.
Or I'm going to die.
Wow, Laura.
And I don't know how, he just was like, I don't know if he was still in shock or whatever, but he took it so well. He was like, okay, you do what you need to do. Like, okay. So I left him and my youngest son. My oldest was already living, in Davis, California. So he wasn't home when it all happened. But I left my husband and my youngest, and I went into the Redwoods for a week. And all of my healer friends either showed up in person or on Zoom. And I had grief yoga, breath work, forest bathing. I sat on the mother tree for hours wailing my pain into it was the most profound, intense, and beautiful week. And I am sure that it saved my life.
It saved your life. It sounds like it.
And it really was a portal. And when I finished that week, all I could think about was like, I'm not even sure I could afford this if I were paying for it. And nobody freaking knows how to do this. And I am committing right here, right now to raise the money to bring a group of mamas into here to do this.
Oh, wow.
Because it's a really beautiful, sacred, gorgeous forest that is so healing and beautiful. And the campus is so beautiful. So I'm actually doing that retreat for the first time. I'm taking a group of grieving mamas, and all my healer friends are coming and volunteering their time on April 4th. But and I'm doing a big event on December 2nd for everyone who's grieving. And, it doesn't matter whether you're a mama or not, to raise the money to bring the mamas who can't pay.
And so let's just slow down there. So that's Good Grief. That is your Good Grief Day.
That's Good Grief Day. Yeah, I'm having a Good Grief Day.
December 2nd in Hermosa Beach. For anybody who's in that area, and you may live stream it. So if you do, we'll pop that in to the show notes. But you talk about grief as a portal, which I just loved that visual. Will you talk about that?
Yeah, it's a rebirth. It is. The best way I can explain it is with the butterfly analogy, right? Like, the caterpillar does not go into the cocoon and grow wings, like I thought when I was a little girl. It goes into the cocoon and completely and utterly decompensates to green mush. Right. It turns into nothing that is recognizable to a caterpillar. And then it already has in its DNA this beautiful, magical creature of the butterfly, and it reconfigures completely from mush, nothing, into this magical creature that we know as the butterfly, which is even more gorgeous, more beautiful, more self-actualized version
It's those
of
imaginal
catabolic.
cells, right?
Yes.
Those imaginal cells get activated, but it, like you say, you got to go through that. I mean, a portal is such a great metaphor, a great visual,
Yeah.
and go
Have to
through that
go into it.
go through the chaos, go through the unknown,
Go into the
to
pain. You
go
can't,
into the pain.
if it's going to be a portal of transformation, it is and I've had lots of portals. I could list them to you and you'd probably be on the, I mean, I've had so many of these. I call them AFGEs, another freaking growth experience. After
Me too. Yeah, we can relate. Freaking growth
but
experience.
This was, obviously
The mother of them all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I know that you cannot. So it is a huge transformative tool that can, break you open and apart so that you become a more empowered, more whole, more beautiful, more self-actualized version of yourself. But you have to be willing to go through it.
Right.
You can't go around it, under it, avoid the pain. You have to go into the pain. You have to lean into it. And most of us have no idea how to do that. We're too scared to do that. Even for me, for most of my career as a therapist, my job, I thought, was to help people, not have to feel their pain or, heal their pain.
Right.
But what I have learned over the past 10 to 15 years, and certainly over the past 3, is that the only way to be free of the pain is to be willing to go all the way into it with support, And so what I learned, especially that week in the Redwoods, was I thought that if I really let myself go all the way into how much pain was there, I would never
You might not come
surface
out
again. I would never come out.
And I think that's a completely rational expectation.
Yeah.
Especially for a parent.
Well, that's why we don't do it, right? Because we think, we gotta pay the bills. I gotta function.
Yeah.
I can't, if I go there, that's why we aren't willing to feel, because we think if I go there, I'm never coming out.
I'm never coming back out.
But the opposite is actually true. If you are willing to just sit down, be with your body, and let whatever wants to come out and through you, and feel the full breadth of the feelings. And sometimes I'll listen to music to catalyze. Sometimes I'll do a body scan. I mean, in the beginning, I didn't have to do anything. I just had to sit still. But if you are willing to let yourself feel it fully, it only takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And it's like a pressure valve releases, like on a pressure cooker, the steam comes out and you feel lighter and clearer and more in your body and more transformed. It's like taking the hugest, most powerful emotional poop after being severely constipated. It's that feeling, when you haven't been able to poop and you have one brewing and it's that feels
it's just endorphins and dopamine and
you
just
that's what happens emotionally when you go into the pain of whatever you're feeling. And so that was a huge aha moment for me that set me on the course. So for a year, every single morning, even when I felt fine and really didn't want to do it because I finally felt okay today, I would still go into my office, and my husband knew, there were going to be weird sounds coming out of there and not to be concerned. And I would just go in there, and if I wasn't already feeling something about to come up, I would just do it. I would just get really quiet. I would listen to my music. I would scan my body from head to toe, and wherever I felt tension or tightness or density, I would just, without making stories up or even thinking about it, I would just put all of my attention on that spot and welcome it and sit with it, and then move my very attached brain out of the way and just let my body take the lead. And I would start crying, or I'd start beating the shit out of pillows, or I'd start rolling around on the floor, whatever needed to. I just let my body do whatever it wanted to do. And then after 10 to 15 minutes, I was done. And
and then when you were done, so on the one hand, I could see you feeling lighter. I could also see feeling really exhausted. Like, did you ever just want to go sleep after that?
Well, I slept for a year straight. And this is the
Okay.
other thing that people don't
Yeah.
understand about grief. It causes tremendous pain in the body, tremendous pain. And that's why it's when you release the emotions, often the pain gets released with it, because often we're in pain because we're unconsciously clenching to kind of keep things together, you know?
Right?
Yeah.
But also, I think because of that, and just because, you know, of the pain, and because it's hard to like breathe or function, you're just exhausted all the time. But what I
Yeah.
found is that so exhaustion wasn't the issue. I was already exhausted, but I was clearer, I was calmer, I felt lighter, I felt freer, I felt more tuned in. And this is the other big epiphany that I knew intellectually, because I've always said to, you know, my clients and to people, look, you know, if you are unwilling to feel one feeling, you are limiting all your feelings. So like if you're unwilling to let anger out, anger, joy, excitement, love, you know, sexual feelings, it all comes out the same channel. So if you can't selectively squelch, you know, if you're squelching anger, you're squelching all of them.
Well,
so I knew that, but what I didn't know is that the deeper I was willing to go into despair and pain, not to stay there, but to release it in the way that I'm describing, it stretched my capacity for joy.
Wow.
So when I did feel joy, the deeper I was willing to go into my pain, the wider I was and the higher I was able to feel my joy.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. So let me ask you this, just two related questions. What would be the advice you would give to your younger self that kind of in terms of being wise about grief? And, you know, I've taken a million notes and, you know, and I appreciate your comments, but if you were to synthesize it, what would that advice be, or what advice do you wish somebody would have given you?
I would want them to know that there is nothing that can't be transmuted and transformed if you are willing to face it and to be with it. But don't think that nobody gets through unscathed, right? So the one thing we can count on is if we're going to have love in our life, which I think we all want, we've got to be willing to get our hearts broken, or you can't love.
Yeah.
And every single one of us, I mean, hopefully you don't have this kind of heartbreak, but every single one of us will have our hearts broken many times if we're lucky, because that's all the times that we've loved, right? So you're going to get your heart broken. You're going to have grief. You're going to have loss. And don't be so afraid of it. Don't live your life defending against it, because you can do everything within your power to protect yourself, and shitty things are still going to happen. And it holds you back from fully living when you're living in fear of heartbreak, and you can't avoid it. I mean, I'm not saying to make dumb decisions, right?
But that,
in the end, you can't avoid it. So be willing to love, be willing to get your heart broken. Know you can't avoid it, and know that you will get through it. You can get through anything if you are willing to face it and go through it. It's when we are unwilling to face it, when we repress it, when we try to numb it away, when we turn to substances or soft or hard addictions or shopping or gossip or whatever it is to distract ourselves. That's when we prolong the pain.
I wanted to say, just I love the juxtaposition and just what you said, when you're willing to be so brave, and it is so brave to be willing to feel those scary feelings and to face this feeling of I might not recover, but I'm going to do it anyway. Like, it's like the ultimate trust. It's like that, like the universe spoke to you and you answer the call. And it's like that to me is the ultimate empowerment. And what did you get? You said clearer, calmer, lighter, freer.
Yeah.
Right. But it took a freaking huge amount of trust. And I feel like that's what you're advocating us to do for all of us who will have our hearts broken in all these unexpected ways, but just to trust that.
Yeah.
It feels like is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I love the attaching, and not only is that do you get freedom, but but the bigger joys. And
Yeah,
I feel like
you really
there's
do.
Yeah.
if you will, an unexpected grace in that not
There
only do we
is.
recover, but an unexpected grace that is like the ultimate. It's like you said, we're also lucky to be alive. It feels
Yeah.
like the ultimate affirmation, but you got to go through that ugly, sticky, icky, yucky cocoon.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta turn to mush first.
You
But
gotta
when
turn
to
you're
mush
willing,
first.
I mean, I have never felt so free as I do now.
Well, and that's what's been amazing. I mean, even in this conversation, but just watching a bunch of your Instagram reels and your interviews and your amazing podcast, to think, to put myself in the role of somebody who as a parent that lost a child unexpectedly and so viciously, and to see you as you are that butterfly. You're like a miracle. So it's just, that's why I wanted to start with this, because what I see you doing in the world is like the most important work that can be done. And I want to thank you for that.
I don't think I'm a miracle. I think life is a miracle, and that what's happening for me is accessible to all of us. I just
But you're you're a teacher,
know.
right? And as somebody who had to go through it, because if you didn't go through it, not that you wouldn't be credible, but you've done it, and
Yeah.
now you're on the other side saying, here's what I know, right? Not what I understand. Here's what I know. And it just, you radiate that. So the other question I wanted to ask you, because you talk about this in terms of, it sounded like there were some really beautiful people that supported you and your family. And then you talk about some people that didn't know what to do. And I would love for you to explain, for people that feel uncertain how to handle somebody else's grief or hurt or discomfort. What's your advice for them? Because I think if more people could learn how to show up and deal with their own discomfort, what a change that would be in terms of how we're able to connect as human beings.
Yeah, that was really interesting to me. I learned a lot about the people in my life when this happened, as I think everyone does when you go through a tragedy. You see who, people who I would have told you before would absolutely be by my side, could not, just couldn't. And it had nothing to do with me. I knew that. It was the way in which it was triggering their own loss or their own fear or their own mortality or whatever. So I didn't take it personally, but many people who I would have assumed would have been right there by my side disappeared for like a year or more.
Oh, wow.
And then others who I didn't even think of as like my innermost circle became that,
They
because
just showed up. Isn't
Yeah.
that that's a
showed up.
miracle?
And then I had friends, like I had one dear friend who, and remember, this is during the pandemic when everyone was remote working, but she picked her butt up and moved from New York to Los Angeles.
What's her name?
Maria.
Maria, we love you. You are
yeah.
awesome. We want you on the show. That is
She's amazing. And
That
she
is
moved her
amazing.
ass to Los Angeles to stay with another friend of mine. So that she could, she was still working, but remotely working.
But she could just be there for you.
Be there for me. And she would just, and this is what I would say to people, just show up. I think the reason why, there's two reasons why people don't show up for others when they're going through tremendous loss. Either it's triggering their own loss and they haven't dealt with their own shit, and so they're going into their own spiral. And in those cases, I say, put your oxygen mask on, take this as an invitation to do your own work and as a catalyst to do your own work. But I think the majority of the time people don't show up is because they have no freaking idea. It's so big and they feel so helpless and so uncomfortable with your pain because they feel like they have to fix it. Or they have to say the right thing, or that they might say the wrong thing. So because of that, they just avoid it altogether.
Yeah.
When the opposite is true, you don't have to say anything. You can say, I have no words. I don't know what to say, but I love you, and I'm just going to sit here next to you. I mean, and a lot of times I could not talk for the first 3 months. Like I literally could not talk. And so I didn't want to be around anyone. And when I did, I would let them know and they would show up, right? But most of the time, they were just texting me, I just left you your favorite coffee on the doorstep. I'm going to walk your dog, just stick him outside. It was things like that. Like, don't just say, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know.
Right, show up.
because they will,
And show up again and
you have
again.
no idea. You don't know how to breathe. You don't know what
Yeah.
will help.
You don't know what to ask
Yeah.
You
for.
don't know what to ask for. So just show up and help with the practical things. And
Mhm.
yes, be there the first week and send the casseroles, but we
Mhm.
get 80 casseroles and there isn't enough room in the freezer for them all. So wait a month and send a
Right.
casserole.
I always feel like, Ray, when everything kind of tapers off, that's really when people really need attention, when they're hurting
and I
so
was
much.
able to receive those more. I mean, not that I didn't
Okay.
appreciate the plethora that showed up when he
Yeah.
first died, but the ones who thought to send me a beautiful plant 6 weeks after he died, when all the other flowers had died, or sent me a beautiful meal, and then I had a group of friends who eventually named themselves the Love Bubble, because that's what it felt like. And they were from all these different times in my life. Most of them had, there were small little groups, but most of them didn't know each other. And somehow they all connected, and they showed up on Zoom every single Friday for a year at 1 p.m. And it was next to impossible for me to, they had to fight me because I was not a good receiver.
You didn't want to,
I didn't want to inconvenience anyone or burden anyone. They're like, you don't care. We're just going to show up. You can show up or not. We're just going to be
there for you, whether you like it or not.
Yeah,
Oh
we're
my
just
gosh,
going to be here. And if you don't come, we'll just talk to ourselves. But they showed up every single Friday.
That's
from a year.
amazing.
Yeah.
And that's, when I think about the good things from the pandemic, how we can show up for each other on Zoom, the fact that we're doing this episode, you've got a really cool studio set up there, but it is a miracle now how people can come together virtually like they couldn't. And I just love that. I love that. Joanne, I know there was something else you wanted to chime in on.
We were going to start with talking about grief and then talk about other things. And now we have 17 minutes left because it's
so consuming.
And it covers so much. You don't have to have had such a horrible loss to relate. But I want to go back to something, which is that you have to deal with pain and what I would say are painful emotions. And so I'm writing a book right now that's about talking to your teenage sons. And so I'm reading every parenting book and every addiction book and every book I can find, right? And one thing I've been able to pull together is that with our boys especially, we teach them to push their emotions down. And what I've been telling my boys is that's what everyone is going to tell you to do. And but it stays there, it gets more and more pressure, and it's going to come out in some way or another. And they were sort of like, oh, okay, mom.
Yeah,
it's like everything. And finally I said this, I'm like, think about how human beings evolved. And if we had pain, we would want to run away from it because it would be like something scratched me. Somebody's sick. I have an injury. I fell in a hole and I sprained my ankle. Don't fall in a hole. Like, we're going to learn from it. We're going to get away from it. I'm like, remember, emotional pain is physical pain. Your brain does not know the difference, right? So your instinct is going to be to want to get away from it, but it will not go away.
Yeah.
So I think about the drugs. I think about all these other ways that our kids are trying to escape pain right now. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about, how you talked to Jackson, who was still a kid, a little kid at that time, about like real concrete things that they can do to feel the pain instead of run away from it. Like, how do you counter that instinct?
Yeah. No, and he is a runner. This kid is like, he goes 24/7. He doesn't stop. And this is before Sammy died, so that's always been his tendency. They all have kind of these orientations.
I always say my boys were born exactly who they were. Like, they change a little bit, but like my Isaac is a runner. He's just, he does the same thing. He's busy. He's got a lot going on.
Yeah, never stops. When he was little, finishing one play date and totally brazen about lancing the next on the car ride to take that kid home, just like never stopping. And and I try to look at it as the gifts in that, right? Rather than looking at it as a dysfunctional thing. He has so much energy. He's so social. He is so driven. When he applies that to something that, he wants to do in service to the world, he's going to light it on fire. But I forced him. I knew when Sammy died that there was no way he was going to voluntarily face this pain.
Yeah.
So I forced him. He was already, intermittently talking to a therapist, but I beefed it up to once a week. And I also, and this is a really big part of it for me, and kind of what I was describing that I did as a daily practice, I got him into somatic experiencing therapy. So he was not only doing talk therapy,
Wow.
I forced him to do somatic experiencing therapy as well. So he learned the vocabulary of how to move his feelings, how to process feelings, how to breathe through feelings, that I know have made a difference to him.
Yeah. And I can see how with boys, especially teenage boys and young men, that might be a therapy because it is about movement for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, and it's like play therapy when they're little. Like they don't necessarily have the verbal skills. So the somatic therapy for adolescents and teens, that makes... And it's back to the point you made with regard to having to literally feel it. We don't feel these things just emotionally. We feel it in our bodies. So that is great advice. And not even just for extreme loss. I feel like
all of us.
So many people, right. And
stress, even just stress, the pressure of getting A's. Just think about all that they have on them.
Yeah. And I really feel that, it's hard to talk to an adolescent about anything because you are an idiot and they are not going to listen to you, right? You can push them and force them to do things. You can guide them to do things. You can encourage them to do things, but you're not going to get them to voluntarily do things that they don't want to do. However, if my recommendation would be, and it is to, if you start early, right, before you become an idiot to them, and before their hormones take over, and before the social pressures, so really before 4th grade or 5th grade, which is when the social pressures start to really kick in, and boys still, as ridiculous as it is, get heckled and bullied for showing tenderness, or emotions. So around that age, not before that. But if we could normalize early on somatic processing, if it was something that parents could model, that school counselors could teach, that if there were classes in mindfulness, stress reduction, and somatic processing in elementary school, there would be so much less pain in the world, so much less bullying, so much less drug use, so much less, of all of it. So much less war, so much less division. I mean, so many things would be solved.
Yeah. Because so much of that does come from just denying it and trying to outrun. Like, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling panicked, I'm feeling grief, I'm feeling shame. Shame is a big one. That so many aggressive, unhealthy things that we as humans do come from. How do I get away from this?
Yes.
How do I get away from this?
Let me just, or not,
numb it out. Let me run it out. Let me distract it. Let me not talk, whatever it takes not to feel it, because there's no understanding of how to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just so painful. And it's like, let me just avoid the pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe with couples, that's similar too, that we don't want to fight, so we don't bring up the pain points. And so then we just end up pushing it away with our relationships too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've also noticed that in general, like with kids, boys and stuff that are like smarter than the average. I don't want to like be like, oh, well, smart kids, but like, I feel like they almost have the like self-awareness of the like, I don't want to put my problems on other people. And so they end up bottling it up twice as much.
Yeah.
And then I feel like that ends up being why those like, the smart kid ends up making the huge decision, because it's like the I've been bottling up so much of it. I haven't even been letting like little bits and pieces go. And I just thought about that when both of you guys were talking about that, because it's like, it does seem almost like disproportionate. Yeah. Like you don't want to burden, and it's, you're smart because you're aware of your how much you're putting on other people, but at the same time, it's like that isn't actually the smart thing to do, though.
No, and I see a lot, these kids that are being born now, especially, but really are all of our kids, who are in their 20s and younger, are these profoundly old souls.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And they feel things so deeply, and they know things that their souls are so wise and so old. And especially for my kids, who I think, came in a little early compared to all of them that are coming in now, a lot of their peers, it doesn't compute, and so they can relate to adults. They see, when I see the letters, I get letters from kids Sammy was in camp with about, he saw that I was having a bad day and he came over and sat down next to me and talked to me. And, he was there. Like anytime he saw someone suffering, whether it was a grown up or a kid, he would go and cheer them up. He was also hilarious. He would tell them a joke or make them laugh. And, he could feel the pain of the world. And I think a lot of these kids are feeling so much pain that isn't even theirs. They're just feeling everyone's pain, everyone's chaos. They don't know what's theirs. They don't know what's others people's. They don't know how to process it. They don't know how to make sense of it. They're teased and heckled, especially if they're boys. If they show any confusion or fear or sadness, anything but aggression, anger, and pompousness, they get teased for. And, it's not, we have to counteract that. We have to counteract that in the schools, which are really dysfunctional in handling this kind of thing. We got to create programs for kids. And I honestly feel like we need to create coalitions of families that come together and say, look, while we were all sleeping and not paying attention, social media has become an insidious and integral part of our kids' lives.
Totally. Yeah.
And they can't function socially without it. So I want parents to form coalitions. This is my fantasy, is that parents of younger kids form these coalitions like of 20 or 30 people, big groups that say we're all committing to, until these laws change, to keeping our kids off social media. We're going to get them all flip phones. They're all going to have access to each other. We're going to give them play dates. They can connect with each other that way. But if we could create these social pods with lots of, not just with 2 or 3 kids in it, because, if they get in a fight, then it's all over. They get
sick of each other.
But
yeah.
But I love that. I love that. I'm going to talk to some of our kids' parents, and because that is practical and something I can't believe we only have like 4 minutes left with you. 6 minutes, 7 minutes. We got to get you back on the show.
I know.
Oh my gosh! We have no truth in advertise. So much more to discuss. We'll get you back. Hopefully, you'll come back and talk with us.
About sex.
Thank you. No, but we've been for the last handful of months, we've been really banging the drum around this thing called comparison culture, and I think that's intuitive to all of us. But we said, you know what, this feels intuitively so systemic and kind of bad. We ended up doing some research, and honestly, Laura, I'll share the research with you, and we'll pop it into the show notes too. But it is extreme, and it's tied back to social media from just how debilitating it is for a large swath of people. And the comparing starts, you nailed it a little while ago, at around 4th grade. 43% of people said they started comparing when they were under the age of 10.
Yep.
And social media has been a massive accelerant of this to actual, deadly and very dangerous ends. I mean, some of the people that wrote in their concerns and experiences talked about suicidal ideation.
Oh, yeah.
And cutting themselves. And so when I think about, so Evan Spiegel, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, I want to name check all of these social media CEOs and say, you guys know this is happening.
They do.
And you just, but it's your business model. And so I love that you're taking so much action with regard to passing a law in, Sammy's law in Congress. But I also love here, as a very practical matter, what you call the coalitions of families that say, you know what, let's take our kids' lives back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
let's normalize it among a tribe of maybe, like you say, 30 or 40 families, and just say, you know what, flip phones, let's minimize the risk to you kiddos and get together. I mean, the other thing that we all know in this loneliness epidemic that has descended and pervaded America is social media and digital devices have also wreaked havoc, right?
Yeah.
We think we're actually social, but we're not.
No,
right?
it's an
When we're
illusion.
just, it's a very bad, sort of perverse illusion. So
Yeah.
this idea of saying, you know what, let's just see if we can create these pods and really try to empower and help our kids is a
because
really
this
wonderful
is the first generation
idea.
of teenagers who came of age and integrated into social media, and they're not. We weren't looking when social media became the only and primary way of socializing and social connection. So if your teenager is not on social media, when we were kids and teenagers, we would call up our friends to find out what was happening this weekend, or I would go to the 7-Eleven on the corner where everyone hung out and find out.
Or the gas station, right? Wherever those kind of random places where we meet
and we would
in real
all
life.
meet up there, and then we would say, "Oh, we're all going to the beach, or we're all going to this party, or we're all whatever." That now, if you are not on social media, you have no idea who's dating who. You have no idea where the party is. You have no idea.
It's the new town square.
Yeah. And so that has become so normalized to them that it's not enough to just, while we weren't looking, this has happened. But now you can't just take your kid off social media.
Yeah, because they would be isolated.
Then they're out of the loop.
They will be totally isolated. That's why I'm trying to get this law passed, so at least they can be safe while they're on there. But until that happens, and who knows if they're going to do everything they can to keep this from happening, we have to take the reins and create something different. And it is, I hate to say this, kind of too late to do that for our teenagers.
Yeah. It's really that next gen, the Gen Alpha is almost that. It's like, okay, let's wake up. Joanna, for babies Ray's age, the really little ones that are just, I'm sure she has a device. I'm sure, but I don't think she's on Snapchat yet at 5.
No.
But you're right, Laura, that it's like that sort of tween generation.
And don't give them a smartphone, give them a flip phone. And they can use their computer for whatever, and when they're of a certain age, they can get on social media. If it's still, I'm not saying you can now, their teachers will have them do stuff on social media, but their social life, if we could get their social life off social media, I think there would be a lot less social media in their life. And we have to find a way to allow some sort of parental monitoring on it, because they can run circles around us and turn off every control. They're natives.
Even the Apple's screen time, it's so flawed. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, none of those controls work,
and they don't care. It's like it's a feature, not a bug. And okay, I want to be mindful. I know you need to go in like 2 seconds, but Laura, you are amazing. You are truly you're an angel. Thank you for being on our show and being so generous with everything that you shared with us today. We will hopefully get you back on, because we promise that we talk about quantum sex. You've got your quantum sex course coming out, I think, mid-November.
We got lots of good stuff with sex to come.
And just there's so much more in terms of manifestation and just a ton. You are a wellspring.
Yes.
So thank you for being on our show, and we'll look forward to having you back. And good luck with Good Grieve Day in December. We'll hopefully be able to tune into that December 2nd.
Thank you. And Joanna, if you're in the area, I don't know where you live, Andrea, but I know Joanna lives not too far away. You should come.
I would love to. If I can pull it off, I would love to make that.
Because
Andrea, come on.
We have all kinds of speakers and mediums and medical intuitives, and we're going to teach you how to connect to your loved ones on the other side, and all somatic healing, all of it.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
you're speaking our language.
Yeah, you totally are. I hope it becomes an annual thing, and I know there's just so much more. So, Dr. Laura Berman, thank you.
You're welcome.
We love talking to you, and I love that. Yeah, don't you love all these people in our studio that just clap on demand? We're so grateful for that. And
Such a great
cat on my lap.
Brian makes us feel really good.
I know. I
can't get away from
just
me.
play that when I'm in the kitchen.
I just need a little standing ovation. So anybody that wants to get a little more of Dr. Laura Berman, go to drlauraberman.com. You can find her on Instagram at Dr. Laura Berman, and yeah, I think we've covered it. So
And all the books are available.
all the books, yeah, yeah. I mean, so many New York Times bestselling books, folks. So
Thank you guys
And
so much. It was
Thanks
great
again.
talking to you.
Good luck with your
Thank you.
appointment.
oh, Laura, we love you. We
Yeah, it was-
really can't wait for you to come back. I know there's a lot more to talk about. Ooh la la, the good sexy stuff. But I'm seriously, I'm so eager to talk with her about the manifestation. She does something called Manifestation Mondays. She talks about co-creating reality and then
Ooh.
communing with the other side. She has some great reels on speaking with mediums and psychics. So there is so much more there. So we are eager to get her back.
Yeah. Well, I think I didn't realize how much of that, like she was saying, she's opened herself up to the messages and seeing when people are in front of her. And I'm going to say something that may make me seem like a narcissist. So put on your seatbelt. But
We'll call you out if you're getting too narcissistic, Joanna. So thanks for the warning.
This may be a total coincidence, but she said when she has people in front of her, she can see a moment in which their lives changed. And she actually described a moment in my life.
No
the
way,
example
that's
she
not
gave was-
narcissistic. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't.
What's that?
I
Was-
think if you, it was dancing in the kitchen as a little kid, and your grandmother makes you feel bad about it. That happened in my life.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it. She said it, and I was like, so I don't know if that was a
Cookie.
coincidence or
That's a big coincidence. Because
we
it didn't
weren't
happen to me.
We weren't talking about sexual shame. We weren't. I mean, and that was the thing. That was how I met Dr. Laura Berman. Is I was hearing her talking about girls and women who were raised in evangelical communities or religious communities and growing up and having these shame problems. And I wanted to talk to her about that, but we didn't because we're going to talk about it hopefully when she comes back. But when she said that, it was, why that example? We were talking about boys. We were talking about death.
That is.
Oh my gosh.
That's like Twilight needed the Twilight sound music. Can we get some Twilight sound music cooked in there?
Do you have the
on the show?
copyright? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
that.
I'll do royalty-free Twilight Zone.
Okay, thank you.
I hadn't realized how much she was doing that sort of manifestation, not manifestation stuff, but like medium type stuff.
Reading.
Manifestation stuff is
Mhm.
like, it does all go hand in hand in a way.
it does.
It's absorbing energy and interpreting it. And I'm excited to talk to her about some relationship stuff with that co-manifestation and things in mind too.
Yeah, she just, I feel like just her courage and wisdom and taking something, as we talked about, that she could have said, I'm just going to check out, maybe not forever, but I'm just going to even just check out until I don't want to be checked out anymore. And that she channeled this voice, and now what she is doing, it really is so inspiring to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can feel that sense of how easy it would be to disappear. To just be like,
And nobody would blame her. I mean, it would just be like, listen, we just want you, we want to make it we want to facilitate making it as easy as possible for you.
Yeah.
And we know what you've gone through, you're gutted. And so how can we just support you in doing the minimum? Right.
Oh my God. When she said be specific too, like, oh, I'm going to do this thing for you. Like that kind of like ruined me, because I was like, oh my God, I've totally been the person that's like, anything you need. Anything you need, just let me know. But it's like, oh my God, you don't know what you need. Like, you don't know anything.
Right.
Like you're going through this whole other thing. And it's like, yeah, someone just to like walk my dog would make a world of a difference. And it's not even something I would have ever thought to be like, hey, can you walk my dog? Like I'm feeling really.
It's just a gesture of care, right? I mean, that's what occurs to me as you say that, Brian. It's like, it almost, it's like very Buddhist. Like it doesn't matter. It really is just that gesture of caring and the specificity that says, I thought about you. It's like they always say about, gifting, it's a thought that counts. I mean, if it's like something really fancy,
yeah,
that helps too.
It is the gift that counts.
It's that intentionality and that just coming from the heart, coming from the caring. And it feels like it always comes back to me in these instances where we meet people where they are and we say, I really see you. And in this instance for her, I see the profound loss or anybody that is grieving. And she said it at the beginning of the show. It can be loss of a job. It could be loss of a pet. It can be so many losses. And I just think it's a good way to wrap up the show, quite honestly, because that's what we're here to do in open relationships in terms of transforming together, to see each other, to show up for each other, to prioritize each other. And she touched on this in our show, but she talks about it elsewhere in her social posts, that it's like people make it overly complicated, or they feel awkward and they don't know what to do. So then they don't do anything, and then they kind of bury themselves. And I just want to say, let's just show up a little bit more for each other, whether somebody's grieving or not, but especially if they're grieving and hurting.
Yeah.
But that's how we build community. That's how we transform our lives, like not letting somebody suffer alone. It really is such a profoundly important message.
I really appreciate that we focus so much on grief. And I really appreciate that, Brian, usually we love having you in there, but there was something about three moms.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like, I felt so connected to her and to Andrea, and that we all have these boys, and we can so relate to that specific
this
type
is our
of
lives.
love.
I mean,
and-
it could be, you can totally see how close to home this hit. So yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I definitely understood that. I was like, I saw what was happening, and I was like, yep, I'm gonna step back on this one. And don't get me wrong, I definitely super resonate heavily with especially some of the stuff she was saying at the end there about because I think it is more my generation that has a lot of the issues with opening up and stuff like that. We've talked about it on the show, but the youth culture, I think, is a lot more willing to connect with each other and talk about, literally their feelings, and but there definitely was, especially when she's talking about her son and how, it's almost overwhelming and isolating and stuff like that. When the pandemic happened, I mean, I was the same way. I was like, this is awesome. I don't have to see people. I don't have to do anything. I like my little hidey hole. But at the same time, it's I also then, only 6 months later or whatever, am like, oh my God, I need contact. I forgot how much I needed contact. I need people,
Yeah.
But so I can't imagine being a kid in that era, being 16 and already trying to figure out your social anxieties. And then how discombobulating it must feel to not understand that, and then the world closed down, and then you're okay, this is good. Oh wait, this is not good. Is it? Is it the conflicting feelings? And
and like everything else, it was both. I wrote that article for the New York Times that what
well,
is
I'm
called...
not. We're not. Oh, we're kind of recording.
Yeah, we're hanging out.
Hi,
Hey.
bud. You're all wet. Oh my God.
Yeah, Zane showed me.
Oh.
Find out.
Oh,
All right.
Zane.
Hi,
Wait, is it
guys.
snowing?
Accepting this podcast because we're the stars of it.
You are kind of
We
the
like
stars of my
that.
life. You're the stars of my
After
life.
that conversation, I just want to
Okay.
look at their little faces and take them in
Not
and
amateur
appreciate
hour.
them, right? It just makes you yes, stay here forever. Don't ever leave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
stay here forever. Don't ever leave. Can we just?
You guys can just
Can
sit
Can
right
we
there.
agree to that?
Never stay here always.
But then you won't get to play Fortnite or Madden.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do they
All right,
play
that could
the
be the-
show? They
I'm
should
sorry?
start playing the show, the game, the show. It's
Oh, I
the
haven't watched
baseball version
Yeah.
of Madden, basically,
Oh.
where they.
Oh
Should
yeah,
it be on the
yeah.
podcast?
Probably not.
It's not.
No,
Yeah.
only if.
I want this to be on the podcast. Please let it be on the podcast.
All right, maybe that'll be something that we stitch in.
That was a good clip right there. That was
Yeah,
really
it's
cute.
a good clip.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
then
I
let's-
think
Yeah, those video games like that. Yeah, it's cute. I wrote that article. What if some kids are better at home? Because for my oldest son, there was so much relief because he was sort of like Sammy in that he had friends, but it was so much work. It was so much work to do ninth grade.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Right.
I think it was ninth grade. And then he got a lot of relief, and then he kind of became that butterfly with that break. Whereas my other son was desperate, and that's when he started playing the show, that baseball game, because he could play it online with other of his baseball friends.
Right.
See,
They-
and that's what people never understood about the gaming community. Especially when I was a
Yeah.
kid and everything, when there was oh, you're gonna sit there at home and play video games and rot your brain with the TV or go out and meet people. And it's you have no idea how much more comfortable it is for some people
Yes.
to meet over an activity. And I did the same thing. dating myself a little bit, but before like the actual online games, you'd actually go to a place. They were called LAN games.
Night. Totally.
Yeah, and you would link up everything with an Ethernet cord, like computer to computer, and
Oh my gosh,
have, like,
really?
yeah. You'd have like 20 people in a room, and you're all playing, and it's like, oh, I just got killed by lone lizard man. Who the hell's lone lizard man? And then you're like throwing popcorn at each other and stuff. And it was like as a really like, I don't want to say like reclusive, but as like a very wallflower kind of kid, like that really opened me up, because then it was like, okay, I learned how to be more outgoing and open in that community, which was a much safer, nerdier community than trying to do that with the jocks and cheerleaders, or whatever. It's like, who cares if you look like a goober in front of your nerd friends,
Yeah.
And then you build that confidence, and then like, not that you ever need to go abandon your nerd friends, they're there for you first. But just that idea of like, I think a lot of kids and boys especially who like don't even realize how much like stuff like that really helps them.
Yeah. Parents do dismiss it a little bit, probably too much. And I had to learn that from a friend of mine who was a female gamer. She was like, I was like, I'm so worried because all they want to do is play Fortnite or Minecraft or whatever. And she was like, listen, it's all about balance. Like, and one of my kids just thrived in these communities, and he was so confident in his video games. He'd be like, all right, guys, we're going to such and such and flank this way. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is an asset for him. But I do think it's about balance, because they also do need to be able to have a job interview someday and look people in the eye and practice those social skills.
Right. But it's a stepping stone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, obviously, Andrea's children do not have a problem with their confidence. They walked right in.
They're like, we need more attention. My mother does not pay attention to us.
Put me on the podcast.
Yeah. I love it. What are we going to do with these children?
That's definitely making it into the show.
Well, somehow you'll stitch it in. Oh, that's so funny.
I really love the very easy practical tip, too, of waiting a few weeks before sending flowers or the meal or the box of chocolates, because when my really good friend's sister just died a couple months ago, and I had something come up and I wasn't able to send flowers, and then I called the floral place. We live in a kind of isolated area, and they were like, we can deliver them on Monday, and it was like Thursday, and I was like, it's not going to get there in time. And then I remember thinking, oh, maybe it'll get there in time for her to have a second round.
Right on time.
And now I'm feeling like maybe that's a smart strategy to take, is arrange with your friends. Well, so-and-so has this going on. I want to send flowers this week. What do you think about next week? What do you think about
or
the
6
week
months
after?
from now? Yeah. And then, like
that's
she
actually
said,
kind of fun.
Yeah.
Like everyone has coordinating weeks. It's like okay, I've got this week, and then 2 weeks later is this person's turn, and then it's this person's turn. And so they have a constant cycle of just new flowers.
Yeah. Or
That's
even a
cute.
group thing where it's like, next week let's send flowers, and then as a group maybe we can go and get her favorite candies and some popcorn or whatever. Some magazines, and put them on a basket on the front step or something, and coordinate it going out for a few months at least, right?
Yeah, or even longer, right? I mean, we know that grief, a lot of times what I've heard, it's like you're numb and in shock depending on the severity and shock of what happened, what the loss is, but especially if it's a shocking loss of a loved one, that the first year you're often in shock and a little numb, and then it's like it gets really bad year 2.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of times there's this weird mythology that a year of grief and you're good, you're done. And it's like, it's not true. And, from people that have, that I've been in touch with that have had those kind of really profound, somebody, like Joanna, like you talked about, just a friend, like you don't expect your friend when you're in your 40s to pass away. You don't expect a child to die before you, right? Or, a spouse to die when they're young and so forth, versus we expect a grandparent or though it's like it's kind of in the natural order of things. I think we can process that because it feels a little bit more how it's in air quotes supposed to be. But yeah, I think those are some great practical tips. I'm certainly going to be taking those away and thinking about as friends and people that I know are going through tough things, how to show up for them in a way that's makes an impact.
I also think I started thinking about, she was saying sometimes it's hard to show up, or someone doesn't show up and you don't know why. And how things get triggered within us. So if something happens in my friend's family or someone who has a best friend that passes, I don't know that it's not going to trigger something in me where I can't walk to that door and talk to them about their best friend, because I'll break down. It'll be all about me and Misty or whatever. I don't know. So I like the idea of depersonalizing someone else's reaction to your thing. It's not, oh, so-and-so hates me, they didn't show up for me. So-and-so's not really a good friend.
Or they're lame. I mean, right? Or we judge them and say, oh, they're
what
so
a loser.
thoughtless.
Yeah.
And how uncaring. And there's so much wisdom when it comes to, I think, all things grief, because people are so out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
In how to help, how to deal with it. Like, am I grieving right? Am I grieving wrong? Right. And then we put that, for those of us who experience that loss, I've heard it from, my niece just lost somebody as an 18-year-old in a terrible car accident. It's like, she's asking, like, am I doing it wrong? And it's just like, no. Right. And, it's just, I feel like it can be so hard. So to add any sort of judgment onto ourselves or other people on top of that, it just feels like, let's give ourselves a little bit of a break.
Yeah. It's that old thing. You never know what someone else is going through. And our grandmothers said it, but it really holds true. My stepmother has this thing when you're driving and someone cuts you off or is going too fast or is going too slow. She always has like a version of why you should give them grace. And I don't think she even realized. She'll be like, maybe his wife is in labor and they're driving to the hospital. Or maybe like she has a story like that for
everybody. And good for her. There's wisdom.
I grew up in Florida, so it's always like, hey, that dude's got a gun. So don't even worry about it. Don't
just
honk at him. Don't do nothing. Leave him alone.
Yeah. So-and-so's having a bad day and they're feeling unbalanced, but she could always be like some extreme thing that would make you laugh and take you out of your anger. But also, it is true. You don't know. Maybe they are in labor. Maybe, or maybe they got bad news, or you just don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. But I love that. I love the way to using humor to diffuse when we're feeling our blood pressure rising and our judgment rising. And a little bit of humor mixed with a little bit of empathy. That's always a good combo. All right, let's wrap up this amazing edition of Open Relationships Transforming Together. Thank you all for listening and watching. We so appreciate our audience. Gosh, you can email us if you have questions or ideas or feedback or advice for the show. We would love your advice for the show.
Yes.
What can we do better? How can we crush it? openrelationships@yourtango.com. We also invite you to subscribe on iHeart, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're getting your podcasts. We would love, love, love for you to download the episodes you listen to, because it helps us with our analytics and helps us understand what's working and resonating better. And I think I covered it all this time. Brian, did I miss anything? I always have to ask you.
Yeah. No, that's it. If you want to help out the algorithm, leave a couple comments, send it to your friends, and you can also subscribe to the. There is a tab at the top of YouTube that says podcast, and you can subscribe to us right there as well. So however you want.
We really do read all the comments. We read all the comments. We read them on social, and we read them on YouTube. So.
Yeah, like a couple episodes ago, Joanna, you were like, "Can people leave comments?" Like, yes, they can leave comments.
Please leave comments. We want to hear from you.
And they did, and I read them.
Yes, exactly.
We appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you. We'll talk to you soon. See you next time.